So I'm a trainer, and I work with groups that learn about the innovation process and want to implement it in the organization. So recently, I was working with a group of executives, and we started a coaching session like we always do. Let's have a little check-in. And Jim volunteered. And Jim said, you know, this week, I interviewed my friend and colleague, Barry. I've been working with Barry for the past 10 years. We've been peers, we've been colleagues, we've been also friends and hang out together on social occasion. Yet, I never had such a meaningful discussion. What happened that day? What made the difference? Well, what happened that week is that Jim's assignment was to go and interview a couple of people inside and outside his organization to understand their perspective on the challenge he was working on. So he went to Barry's office, asked a few questions, he listened, and he got to hear some stories. He got to hear feelings, emotion, actions, experience, all from Barry's perspective. And also in that discussion, he discovered that he had some assumption coming up into the project, but that Barry had a very different perspective. So, you know, seeing the world from getting into Barry's world, seeing his world, and using an ethnographic approach is what made the difference. So what is ethnography? Let's go back a little bit. At the beginning of the 20th centuries, anthropologists and ethnographers realized that to study the population they were interested in, there might be a better way than just studying from the academic distance. And they thought about, like Malinowski here, who is in New Guinea, they could go and live with the population. And so that approach started making a difference. So moving back to the past 30 years, this anthropologic approach has been little by little adopted by some organizations and corporations, often facilitated by highly trained ethnographers. But more recently, those approaches started to be used by teams, and I would say under the influence of user-centered design and design thinking, that thought that those approaches can also work when they're working on an innovation project, when they're working on creative change. So what does it make sense? It makes sense because if you're not going to go in the jungle, you're not going to see the tiger. And we need to see, we need to hear, we need to feel those experiences to help inform us. So we need to see these people, we need to see the interaction, you need to see the environment. You need to hear those stories that we talked about, and you need to feel those emotions that are happening. And then you and your team can start, you know, sharing those notes, those data, those videos you have, and starting making sense of it and create some meaningful insights. So let me give you my example, personal example. I was working for a startup, and we were in the field of interior design. So the first thing we do when we went to people's home, and we visited their home and asked them how they make the interior design decision. So I remember we went to and met John. John is a real estate agent. He's in San Francisco. He has a very nice apartment in the Marina district. And so he showed us around his apartment, and then he pointed at the table and said, you know, I've been wanting to change that dining room table for the past couple of years. And I look at magazines, I look at catalogs, I went to stores, and I'm just overwhelmed. So I still have that old table. And by hearing John's stories and other stories, we realized that we had to simplify the interior decision making, and so Decoist was born. So what Decoist is an online services when you can fill out a little quiz to understand your personal preference for different styles. You can send a couple of pictures, answer a couple of questions, and say, I need help to get a new couch. And 2 days later, you get a little board with 2 or 3 options, all at home and all under $300. So you also can do it. You don't have to be a highly trained ethnographer. You don't have to spend hundreds of hours in the field to start making a difference. So the first thing you have to ask yourself is, what is your environment? Is it an office? Is it a school? Is it a store? Is it a stadium? Whatever it is, think about your environment. And I like to think, we talked about metaphor before, I like to think about ethnography a little bit like a fishing expedition. So you might have an idea of the area you want to go fishing, but before you drop your net, you will not know, and pick it up, you don't know what kind of fish you'll get, you don't know how much fish you get, and maybe you're not getting any fish. And that's OK. That's a fishing expedition, and then you drop your net somewhere else. So there is really three main approaches in ethnography. The first one is observation. The second one is interviewing, like Jim did. And the third one is immersion. So let's talk a little bit about the three approaches. In observation, you want to kind of slow down and look around. Look at the people. Look at the environment. Look at the interaction. Look at the objects. Look at what's happening. So let's imagine for a second that you are in charge of CE talk for next year. One of the things you might want to do is look at this room, look at the surrounding, observe, and see what you see. So I'm going to give you 10 seconds, and I want you to count as many things as possible that you notice is in this room that you had not noticed before. So you have 10 seconds. Just observe this room, the floor, the ceiling, the surrounding, the people, everything. Okay, so how many of you notice at least 2 new things? Raise your hand. How many of you notice at least 5 new things? Great. 10? Awesome. So the second approach is interviewing. And there's definitely an art to interviewing, and you get better as you practice. But let me give you a couple of starting points if you wanted to do it tomorrow. The first thing you have to think about the fishing zone. So create an outline, kind of the broad area that you want to explore with the person you interview. The second thing is think about the type of questions. You want open-ended questions. You want questions that are an invitation to learn about their life and their stories and all of that. So don't use a closed-ended question. No yes and no, open question, invitation. And then what you want to be flexible. Because what happens is the interviewee might go in a direction that you haven't thought about. Let's go on the journey with them. You might get a gold mine there. And then the last thing is listen. So you should be listening 80 or 90% of the time. It is for them, and it's for you to listen. And then the third type of activity is called immersion. So like Malinowski, you can yourself experience and immerse yourself in that. So for example, if you're thinking about opening a restaurant, be a waitress somewhere else for a week and see what happens. If you want to create an online curriculum, just be a student in one of the free classes and see what happened to be an online student. So what did you get by using this approach? I would say you get 3 things. The first one is will really help you get a 360 perspectives. You will talk to different users, and here I'm using a very broad definition, thinking about all those who may be affected by the change you may create. And by getting their perspective, your own perspective on the challenge is going to be different and broader. The second thing you'll get is you're going to, like Jim, think about the assumption. You'll have assumption coming into a project. Your company has assumption. Your culture has assumption. And are there assumption, or should they be challenged? So is this a duck? Is this a rabbit? Is this a duck rabbit? Is this something else? And then finally, what you'll get is you'll start feeling empathy and getting out of your head and getting into your heart. So you can do it, and you can get started. Start small, like the little turtle. You know you want to go to the ocean, but just move slow, go little, and remember, you want to remember the users. You want to remember you need to go into the jungle and use your heart. So does it work? Jim is not the only one that had a big ha-ha that week. I've consistently get that feedback that when you start using ethnographic approaches, it will change the way you see challenges. It becomes a skill, and eventually it becomes a new mindset. So I just want to leave you with that. A daily dose of ethnography will keep the assumptions away. Thank you.